It's Friday, and welcome. That means it's another edition of the Zogby Report, real and unscripted, and it really is real and unscripted. Those of you who've been watching, or those of you that are new, understand that I'm John Zogby. I'm here with my son, Jeremy Zogby, and partner. Hey, Jer.
Hey, Dad.
And we talk. We talk about events of the day, a lot of politics generally, because that's what folks kind of expect from us, but not all the time. And it's pretty much spontaneous, certainly on Jeremy's side, because I get to pick the topics often at the last minute. But probably no surprises this week. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, good. So we are going to talk about politics. I'm going to start with the premise that the 45th and the 46th presidents of the United States both had pretty good weeks this week. Okay, so let's start with the 45th. Obviously, that's Donald Trump. He made a risky endorsement in the GOP primary in Ohio. J.D. Vance, at the time of the endorsement, was riding in third place and really not going anywhere. And Trump's endorsement thrust him into first place, and he won. And he not only won, he won pretty substantially in a crowded race, in a race where there were really four candidates all claiming the Trump mantle. And Vance got 32% of the vote. What did you think before I get into the analysis? Am I right? Was this a good week for Trump because of that? Or was it Vance just happened to be a good candidate?
Well, I mean, we polled before and we did an informal poll and we decided not to release it. But of course, we were right. We showed that Vance would pull ahead because we weren't tracking it before. It's hard to gauge whether or not that his endorsement pushed Vance into the lead. But I mean, if I had to guess, that probably was the case. And of course, there was a big rally in Nebraska. And I mean, I think it's no secret Trump is going to run in 2024. So for that reason, it's a good week for Trump.
So here's what was going on in Ohio. You had a number of cross currents, and I want to get into other states. There's a variety of cross currents going on that make this year very, very interesting. But on the Republican side in Ohio, and on behalf of Vance, in addition to Trump's risky endorsement, Vance was able to get on Tucker Carlson's show actually a few times. One big interview, actually the entire hour. Now, whether you like him or not, I mean, Tucker Carlson is the #1 cable guy. He's the Bill O'Reilly of today, the Rush Limbaugh of television. He's got a devoted following. And, that is another very powerful endorsement and an opportunity also to go beyond J.D. Vance to J.D. Vance's message, the hillbilly elegy, and how places like rural Ohio, where he grew up, are the forgotten middle in America. So he got to really zero in on his message with a free forum, along with the president's endorsement. And then add to that Peter Thiel, very famous and iconoclastic venture capitalist from the Silicon Valley, poured in $15 million of his own wealth into Vance's campaign. That goes a long way in a GOP primary in Ohio. And so this was a perfect storm for Vance at the end. Plus, obviously, he benefited from the fact that there were at least three other major candidates clustered somewhat together who were going after that very same message, and he benefited from that split in the party. Now, what's interesting here is that the Democrats kind of had a primary in name only. Tim Ryan, congressman, moderate congressman, kind of prototypical Ohioan, not a radical in any way, was never in question winning the Democratic primary. So now you're going to have a MAGA candidate against a middle of the road candidate. And, to Ryan's benefit, I wouldn't be surprised if you started to see what's left of the moderate kind of establishment, even establishment conservative Ohioans, the kind that voted for Matt Dolan in the GOP primary, kind of head over to Tim Ryan. But November is going to be interesting. You're going to have a candidate on the right for the Republicans and a candidate for the Democrats, posturing themselves in the middle. Really, anybody's guess. Honestly could be, from the vantage point of today, a Democratic pickup in Ohio, but we got a long way to go. You ready to move on to Pennsylvania?
You can start with Pennsylvania.
Yeah, okay. So we got a number of things going on in Pennsylvania. Fasten your seatbelt. So it's coming right up. It's May 17th. As we speak today, it's the 6th. So what's going on? You've got 3 MAGA candidates on the right. This is the U.S. Senate. Okay, you have David McCormick, a very wealthy former hedge fund manager. Mehmet Oz, obviously the famed talk show host. And now Kathy Barnett, who is a radio commentator, a black conservative, who's starting to rise in the polls and almost close to making this a 3-way race, which could be interesting if something happens in this knockdown, drag-out fight that's going on between McCormick and Oz. They're beating each other's brains in. There was a debate just this past week in Philadelphia, and all the candidates, there are 2 others as well, jumped on Oz as a carpetbagger, as someone who has changed his positions on virtually everything, as a dual citizen who voted in the Turkish elections in 2018, and then finally, and probably most dramatically, on the leaked possible Supreme Court decision on abortion this past week, claiming that Oz has gone from a liberal pro-choice on abortion to now an ultra-conservative. Oz was on the defensive most of the time, but here's another instance where, as we know, the 45th president actually endorsed Mehmet Oz. They go back years, and Oz's fortunes were turned around. One can't say he's got a commanding lead right now. He doesn't, but he did go from sliding into a second place to sliding into in the lead, by a couple of points. But the most recent poll, Franklin and Marshall, what's interesting is that Oz is about at 21 and McCormick is at 18, but Kathy Barnett is at 16. And I think the most interesting piece of all of that is that 42% are still undecided. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that a lot of money is being spent on negative advertising. And it appears that Republicans are buying that negative advertising, that neither McCormick nor Oz are people that they necessarily like. What do you think? You think Oz is going to win in 10 days, actually?
Well, if Ohio is any bit of a window into what happens going forward, a bellwether, like people suggest Virginia was back in November, it looks to be in the case of Oz. That's about as much as I would say. I'd say that you covered that pretty thoroughly. So, I mean, why don't we go to the national scene? Of course,
I do have a little more on Pennsylvania that I want to talk about, if that's all right.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, yeah, because unlike Ohio, there is a Democratic primary, kind of a foregone conclusion. the two top candidates are the Lieutenant Governor, John Fetterman, and Connor Lamb, a congressman who gained fame, both from Western Pennsylvania. Anyway, steel and coal country. Connor Lamb served in Congress a couple of terms. Very moderate, one might argue, is former military man, moderate to conservative Democrat. Fetterman is a populist progressive Democrat. Interesting fellow. Fetterman is 6'8". He looks like a lumberjack, dresses like a populist. He's Harvard educated. He's the lieutenant governor. He was the mayor of a small city called Braddock, 2,000 people, and did some really good work restoring that city. But there's a foregone conclusion here that Fetterman is going to win. He's ahead in the polls by 35, 40 points. And it's also a foregone conclusion that there's going to be a MAGA running on the Republican side. And so now you're going to have Pennsylvania, kind of like a very moderate state, having to choose between what I think both would eschew these terms, but a far right Republican and a far left Democrat. Republicans are licking their chops. They think they've got this one easy in coming up in November. Democrats are not happy. That is the Democratic establishment, not happy with Fetterman at all. But he certainly is popular and has been able to show that he has some crossover appeal because of the populist message, meaning that he does appeal to some blue-collar workers who just simply like him and like his image and even like his position on some issues. It's going to be very, very interesting to see what happens in Pennsylvania. We'll get a clue next Tuesday.
Yeah, and so the national political scene is important because I think it's fair to say that what people watch happening on the national scene filters down to the state level. And so, there were quite a bit of bombshell things, developments that happened this week. Of course, you alluded to the SCOTUS leak, which I'll get to, but I know we're talking about the midterm elections, but people, it's crazy to think people are simultaneously also looking at 2024. Harvard Harris came out with a bombshell poll. Actually, there's 61 pages of questions, each page dedicated to a question, and I would highly recommend that our listeners just scroll through it. The Harvard Harris CAPS poll. Of course, they revealed that inflation is the biggest concern. It also revealed that if you had the election today, a Republican 2024 primary, I believe it said that Trump would pull ahead of DeSantis. But what really stood out is that Mark Penn, who heads the Harvard Harris poll, asked a question that I think everybody should be asking. What do people think about the Hunter Biden laptop story, and what does that portend for Joe Biden? And so in one of the questions, it flat out, well, let me back up. First of all, only 37% of Democrats say that Joe Biden should run for re-election. Now, I know you were just talking about the 2022 midterms, but that kind of sentiment looking at 2024 will no doubt about it could have a major impact on the Democrats. And so going further, I said about the Hunter Biden laptop question, 58% of Americans, overall voters, believe it is a genuine story. And 58% of voters nationwide believe that the content of it is genuine, and meaning that Biden is the father and the son have some ties between the alleged illegal wrongdoings. That is a major problem for the Democrats. Now, on the other hand, you talked about the SCOTUS leak, and I could see where that would really energize the Democrats. It would give them something that they really need, some momentum going into 2022 to either maybe break even in Congress, potentially pull ahead and maintain control of the House. But the counter to that would be, that's a single issue vote. And how much legs does that single vote issue have in giving a long-lasting burst of energy for the Democrats amidst this growing controversy of the Hunter Biden laptop, which, it's known is no longer a conspiracy theory. The New York Times itself has admitted this is a story with legs. So there's a lot of problems for the Democrats at the national scene that will then play out in some of these major battleground states.
I don't know where the Hunter Biden story goes from here, but there are a couple of things that I want to respond to, and another that I want to add to. The first is on the abortion story. The abortion issue, the sides are drawn, and what drives the abortion issue as an electoral issue is some cataclysmic event. It was Roe v. Wade that really was a driving force, gave birth to the right to life movement, and the right to life movement that helped Republicans win elections subsequent to that, notably Ronald Reagan and the Republican takeover of Congress in 1980, or at least the United States Senate. The next big cataclysm that we have on the issue was the assassination of the OBGYN in Niagara Falls in 1998. I remember that election. I was polling following 10 very close U.S. Senate races, and liberal Democrats, progressive Democrats, were telling us that they were not sure. They were probably not going to vote. They didn't particularly like the likes of John Edwards in North Carolina and Chuck Schumer, moderate, in New York. But with the assassination of that doctor came the outpouring of votes, particularly young women, and Democrats won those races, and it was enough for them to pick up seats in the U.S. Senate. And this was during the impeachment troubles of Bill Clinton. Then we move into the partial birth abortion, or late term abortion, whatever you want to call it, the next cataclysm, score one for the Republicans. In this instance, what we've seen in recent elections is that if young women are energized and turn out to vote, Democrat wins. That's what put Barack Obama over the top in 2012. Is it enough this time around? Well, we have to see how this plays out. This was a leaked decision. This could very well have been a trial balloon. But just one final point on that is that it's not slam dunk for the Democrats, because as you and I have talked before, there are changes and growth taking place among Latinos in the United States. Yes. And Latinos are not necessarily in the pro-choice camp. And so if they are energized to vote, it could very well be on the pro-life side. But, so stay tuned on that issue.
Yeah, I've wrestled with the question, who leaked it? Was it a Republican insider or was it a Democratic insider? And for most of the time, I was thinking it was a Democrat insider, that it would give that necessary jolt that they're desperate for, because there's a lot of problems going on with the Democratic Party. But now that you say that, I think that there's probably a better chance that it was a Republican leaker who was thinking one step ahead, perhaps looking at the growing Latino vote in the favor of the Republicans. Now, going back to Oz and these other, key battleground states, and looking at, is the MAGA candidate going to win, or is the more establishment candidate going to win? And, I think we're just going to see a replay of 2016, in which the MAGA brand effectively made the Republicans cave to it. And a lot of that worked in their favor because of extreme events happening. And there are no shortage of extreme events going into 2022 as well in 2024. I've already talked about inflation is by far now the most important issue. But another issue, I think, will be that the MAGA vote will and the MAGA candidates will seize upon is freedom of speech. You go back and you look at Elon Musk and the storm that erupted because how dare he say that he's going to buy Twitter and clean up Twitter and bring back freedom of speech, which prompted, and this is completely Orwellian, the creation of a disinformation governance board. So how that's going to work in the favor of Democrats when in this race, as in every other race, it's a battle for the independents. And I just don't know how independents are going to be swayed by that kind of stuff.
Lots of things going on here. On my end, I just want to end with the second piece of my premise, which was that both presidents had a good week. As you know, and everybody else should know, I do a weekly report card for the Washington Examiner. And unless something changes over the next few hours, I'm going to give President Biden a good grade this week for a good week. His poll numbers are actually up a couple of points. Unemployment rate, held steady, 428,000 new jobs created, wages up 5.5%. He got a boost, I think, from two boosts, one from the Fed, increasing interest rates and another 0.5%. And then I think a boost also, regardless of who the source is, a boost from the Alito draft decision, because Democrats are at least enthusiastic and talking again. And so last word for you, as always.
Well, the Federal Reserve is supposed to be independent, but I think we know that they're not. And I've said this before, and I'm not the only one saying it. Think about this. The Fed has been talking a lot about being hawkish. They walk a fine line between being a dove and assuring the investors and the day traders and the stock market traders that we'll come to your rescue if need, but we're also going to normalize interest rates. You can't be both a dove and a hawk. The Fed, like I say, has been talking about being hawkish, and yes, they finally did raise the interest rate, but look at, or they announced that they were going to officially raise the interest rate. But look at the market meltdown that happened last night. And so, long story short, is this economy has been addicted to a dovish Fed, and now that we're finally acting upon, after months and months and months of talking about hiking interest rates and normalizing it, that kind of market meltdown. Imagine what happens when we actually reach 3% interest rates. I don't even think it'll get that far. I think they'll have to reverse course. They'll have to go dovish, or otherwise face a complete meltdown.
Hate to end on the word meltdown, but I think that's what we'll do. Covered a lot of topics today, real and unscripted. I'll see you soon.
Yep, as always. Have a good weekend.